That's no moon. It's a space station.
It's too big to be a space station.
Hey guys, my name's DocJade and welcome to episode 6 of K2SE. So, if we want to set up pyroflux smelting, we'll need a nice long-term supply of ore, since shipping ores around is slightly resource inefficient. Our current ore input is pretty good, and at the rate we're mining these patches, it should last quite a while. Production currently outpaces consumption, so the trains are backing up. But once those patches run out, we'll need to find and defend new patches. But holding back the biters is becoming quite time-consuming. So I considered building a massive circular perimeter to hold back the biters. After scanning the planet and outlining lakes, there's a couple good choke points, but hardly any iron ore, so pyroflux smelting on Navis is a no-go. My next choice would be Saren, but there's hardly any iron here either, and way too much water. Looking at the Universe Explorer, there aren't any iron core planets to be found. Turgmam has plenty of iron to go around, but a lack of water and oil would make mass production complicated, since we need sulfuric acid. Even if we ship those up, we still need a ton of power, but sending up enough barrels of water for a nuclear setup would be borderline impossible. Water ice, however, could in theory let us get the water up there fast enough. We can mine water ice from Navi's orbit, but there's hardly any room up there, so at some point we'll definitely need to make some space platform scaffolding. It's a little expensive though, so I'll try to just shift around the science production to fit the mining in. One of the asteroid belts near Turgmam has a bunch of methane ice, so I checked to see if it had a water byproduct, but it only makes methane gas, which stinks. At some point we'll mass produce our own ice. We have plenty of cryonite on Saren, but I don't want to set that up right now. But on top of all of that, Turgmam barely has any coal, which we need to make steel. We don't have a way to make coal without a ton of oil or some later game items, so we'd have to ship that in too. Oh well, regardless, let's go get the water ice. I want to cannon the water ice back down to Navis, then distribute it from there, so we need to launch all the capsule ingredients up to the space platform. But making new lines of cannons every time we want to send stuff is going to get very messy very quickly. So instead, I'll adapt the rocket sushi system to work with delivery cannons. For things that don't need to be sent in bulk, we can make a little cannon mall. The cannon mall will also act as an input to Navis. We'll have a global channel that requests items like vulcanite blocks and water ice. Then we can stick some cannons off to the side and set them up. Side tangent, we might be able to find a better planet or moon to set up pyroflux smelting on instead of Turgmam, but to find it, we need to keep yellow science running, so I'll ship more cards up to orbit. After hooking up all the capsule ingredients, adding a receiver, and setting the conditions, mining productivity 2. I'll go up to the space platform with another load of science, then move the lab. Well, biters in the tech cards. I don't have any laser turrets, so there's nothing I can do remotely. So I'll hurry up and finish moving the lab. After practically drowning them in dew and seeing even more biters, I'll research laser turrets and design a wall. The wall doesn't need to be super strong, just strong enough to hold the biters back while I'm away. But then I decided I wanted to use the choke points down here, so I spent a couple hours cleaning out the biters. Once they were all gone, I added some pollution filters to the middle of the base to slow down the spread just a little bit. Back to space, the space science ran out of a couple ingredients, so I'll load up a rocket and set up the ice cannon. With that set up, I launched up the ingredients, which will eventually start sending the water ice back down. Looking at our options again, I still haven't spotted a better planet to set up pyroflux smelting on, but I'll keep looking. I'll start stockpiling all of the materials for the smelting setup. I want it to be easily tileable, so I'll ratio the setup around a yellow belt of ore input and use productivity 2 modules wherever possible. We'll need quite a few different buildings. And don't forget copper, but no steel for now, until I can figure out how to make coke up there. The main reason the mall sucks is due to a lack of logistics robots to deliver materials, so I'll set up a new UMB, sliced to make both logistics and construction robots. I got attacked again while setting it up, and I have no idea where this guy came from. One eventually later, that's robots. I started adding roboports as well, but once again, biters, this time on the uranium mine. After some more maintenance and a minor skill issue, that's roboports. Another load of resources for science later. I'll get back to stockpiling for the smelting setup. Water ice. Just to get them over with, I'll research everything we can while I keep gathering materials. Flamethrower, landmines, defender, combat rocketry, ironclad? No idea what that is. While I was hooking up more delivery cannons for the future smelting setup, I got a delivery from Ted Kaczynski. Steel walls, portable generator. Refined flammables 1, stronger explosives 2, follower robot count 1, weapon shooting speed 3. Since we have ice now, we should start setting it up to the vulcanite block production on Turgmam instead of water barrels. I'll hook up refined flammables 2. I'll hook up the water ice to the sushi loop and send it on up. Follower robot count 2 and biofuel, reinforced plates, medpack 2, braking force 2. And here I start making the casting machines and industrial furnaces, larger logistics containers. Next up is lithium, which we can't really use for anything in the short term, but we can research lithium sulfur battery, then better robot battery, which will let the bots go 40% further per charge. Since it's an upgrade, we don't even have to make the lithium or the lithium batteries. And to move around a bit quicker, I'll research level 2 jetpacks, which don't actually say if they're faster or not, but I'll assume bigger number is better. Getting close on building stockpiling, but we're still missing quite a few modules. Lithium, the batteries, exploding bot, better bot batteries, jetpack 2. The only interesting thing left is nuclear fuel reprocessing, which would give us tritium, which is used in DT fuel cells, but those are so far away there's no point in making it. Here's what the casting machine looks like, which is definitely not a placeholder. Molten metals go in, ingots come out, and with pass-throughs on each side, it should be pretty easy to make a compact setup. Now we just need the modules and condenser turbines. We should definitely set up some better module production. I would make level 3 modules, but there's no immersite or cryonite on Navis, so we'll just do level 2s for now. After researching the level 2 modules, let's automate all 3 level 2 modules in one cell. I bet I can make it fit. Green circuits, quartz, silicon, some nasty loader shenanigans for glass, then plastic for electronic components. More copper wire for red circuits, then batteries, more batteries, and some sulfur crammed in the corner. Solid fuel, even more wire, and electric motors. First up is speed modules. Level 2s take electric motors, red circuits, and green circuits. Level 1s take green circuits, electronic components, and solid fuel. Then productivity 2, which is green circuits, red circuits, and sulfur. Level 1s take green circuits, electronic components, and glass. And we're left with just enough room to squeeze in efficiency 2. Red circuits, green circuits, and batteries. Level 1s take copper wire, green circuits, and electronic components. I love building compact setups like this. With properly proportioned production of productivity modules, I can improve the pre-existing science by promptly populating its production with the newly produced productivity. The main base only has 3 more green circuit assemblers than this module production. Crazy. Although we are struggling to feed it enough copper. The last few modules are on their way, I just need to make the last 15 condenser turbines, which are the last things we need to go to Karis. I changed my mind. We're going to put the pyroflex smelting there instead of Turgmam. Karis is one of Navis's moons. It's a decent size and has a low amount of biters. But more importantly, it has a decent amount of every ore, except for rare metals and uranium. It also has immersite and iodite, which I'm guessing we'll need soonish. There's quite a lot of water, but we can turn nearly anything into landfill, so we could use the ores from these core seams to make landfill. All of the major resources are also nice and close to spawn, so building casting up here should be nice and simple. I'll point a rocket at it, but we really shouldn't launch a rocket full of expensive buildings without a landing pad. So I'll load up the rocket, then see if I can get all the way to Karis from here using a space capsule. After launching into Navi's orbit, I can't go to Karis orbit, but I can go to Saren orbit. A quick landing on nothing later, I can get to Karis orbit from here. So over, down onto nothing, then down onto the surface. One landing pad later, I'll launch over the materials, including a bunch of raw ingredients and defense items. I'll set up some solar, unload the landing pad, then realize I forgot to bring logistics robots. Oh well. There's oil right next to spawn, so I'll set up a refinery and cracking setup to make petroleum, which we will burn in gas power generators if the solar can't keep up. A big battery bank and more solar later, I'll start clearing out the biters. Since planet-wide threat is only 17%, it shouldn't be too hard to completely wipe them out. The real issue is doing it quickly, since it's also a race against biter expansion. Regardless of how easy it is to take out most nests, running around the entire moon is a very, very time-consuming process. I'm also slowly running out of ammo. I considered using laser turrets with big power poles for distribution, but going that far out with poles would be really annoying to clean up. But more importantly, I'm completely out of Baja Blast, and it's nearly impossible to clear out worms without it. So we'll have to whip together some production. It doesn't have to be pretty, as long as it works. Problem is, we need wood for coke for steel, and I failed to realize there aren't any trees on this moon. Luckily, I brought glass and wood, so I can make greenhouses. Setting up ore washing right now would take way too long, so I'll smelt everything quickly and dirtily by mining directly into the furnaces. After setting recipes and putting together the circuits, now for iron, which is slightly weird to fit next to the lake, so no direct mining this time. I'll connect it up to steel smelting, and that's Baja production. Although we aren't making nearly enough coke, so time for some more greenhouses. With decent Baja production, I reached the ends of the not Earth and resumed biter pruning. Saren got hit by a mass ejection, but it didn't do anything. I cleared out around half of Karis, then I ran out of ammo, so I built production for that. After 2 hours of biter clearing, Karis is finally clear. 0% threat. With the entire moon conquered, I jokingly suggested moving the entire Na'vi space up here. Then set up concrete production so we can pave these smelting arrays later. I forgot to turn off Baja. Then I set up core mining for infinite landfill production. It's power hungry, slow, loud, and smells of elderberries, but at least it's free. I can burn the oil for some more power, which has the added benefit of making it even louder. I was joking before about moving the entire Na'vi space up here, but a completely clear moon like this might be better suited for a full base instead of just a smelting array. For a sense of scale, the Na'vi space fits here pretty easily. And if we landfilled in the entire moon, we'd have more room than we could ever want. But if we're going to do that, we'd need to go all out. So how about we cover the entire moon in concrete? Concrete doesn't close core seams, so there's no penalty for paving the entire moon. If my math is correct, we'd need around 8.5 million concrete, and probably around half of that in landfill to fill in the lakes, which doesn't sound too insane. And Karis is in such an amazing spot too. It's right next to Saren, who has cryonite, and Ryu is loaded with stone that we could use for concrete production. And to top it all off, delivery cannons use less power on smaller surfaces. You know what? Let's go for it. Even if we completely drain Karis of ores, we can always ship in more from other planets. We're going to need a ton of stone for concrete. I could make it on Ryu, but there's tons of biters and the patches aren't much bigger than Karis, so this patch will do. I didn't plan for a full base up here when packing, so I'll ship up more buildings in the background. Transporting this much stone around would be a pain, so we'll need to make the concrete on site. I'm not exactly sure how much I want yet, so I'll build enough production for 1 red belt of stone input. And since we have a limited stone supply, I'll put productivity 2 in everything I can, which results in quite a large setup. While I was placing solar panels to power it all, a meteor directly hit the mall on Avis. Those warehouses hold a lot of items. That was probably our most expensive meteor so far. I added stone and iron inputs to make the concrete setup tileable, then moved it over to a better spot. But as usual, the moment I start doing something, the biters start attacking something. This time it's the copper mine. I'll place some laser turrets. After letting the bots build concrete, solar, and stone, I'll hook everything up. Most of the miners have efficiency 2, so the power draw is surprisingly low. The stone makes its way to bricks and sand. I'll throw in some iron for the sticks. And that's concrete. Just add water. After being astonished by some blinking lights, I checked in on the infinitely bad landfill production, which has made a grand total of jack squat. I'll start placing a Roboport grid from the landing pad to concrete production. Double said production, then deal with biters on Avis again. Then I started placing the concrete we've made so far. I tore down the old production, placed its output, then connected the 2 power networks together. More concrete, pulverizers to make more concrete, more concrete. Placing concrete on just this island is already pretty time consuming, so doing the entire moon by hand is definitely out of the question. We're making almost 3,000 concrete per minute, which is pretty good, but we've still got a ton of leftover stone production. How about 2 more slices? But once again, biter attack. At what point does a pattern become a trend? More concrete. And that's the entire island. We still have extra stone, so I'll turn the excess into landfill while using way too many splitters. Speaking of too much, time for another load of materials from Navis, mostly belts this time. Well, that's fun. More biters and more concrete. I'll put placing concrete on hold. I still need to set up some better landfill production. How many landfill assemblers do you think 10 pulverizers can feed? The answer is 1. Landfill takes a ridiculous amount of sand. And all that sand takes a lot of stone, so I'll rebuild the stone mine as well. Doing some napkin math, we're going to need somewhere in the neighborhood of 81 million stone to make enough landfill. There's no way we're going to be able to mine anywhere near that much stone. We could also make landfill out of ironite, but we don't have much of that either. Just to future-proof though, I'll place a few offshore pumps before we fill in the lakes. Once again, biters on Navis. Fine, I'll head over and deal with it myself. Back to worrying about making landfill. After scanning the entirety of Ryu, every patch on the moon combined still isn't enough stone. I looked through the recipe book for a way to infinitely generate stone or sand. You can make stone by processing vitamelange, but there isn't a loop anywhere in the process, so never mind on that. I didn't get any ideas from looking at other planets or moons either, but I was able to mark a couple moons as biter-free. Well, focusing on making landfill would take way too long, so let's just move on and figure out another way to make it later. Back to Karis, let's finally start building pyroflux smelting. We'll take the bus to the left. Pyroflux smelting requires the ores to be enriched before you can melt them down, which is fine by me, since we'll get extra iron from the process. I'll ratio for half a belt of input, which is 10 chemical plants. Once we melt the ores down, they go into these casting machines to be turned into ingots. They're pretty slow, so we'll need 72 of them. Then to actually melt the ores, we'll use 45 industrial furnaces. Since I'm putting productivity in everything, the setup ends up being pretty large. I also made the design tileable, so it'll be easy to expand production in the future, if need be. After marking all the inputs and requesting the modules, I'll make a blueprint. Since the ingot production tiles vertically, I'll have to shift it over so we don't run into the offshore pumps. Despite my best efforts, the biters are back again, and this time they set their sights on the nuclear reactor, which I really don't want to explode. Once they were dealt with, I'll surround the top, left, and bottom sides of the base with walls. Not sure why I didn't do this earlier. Those will take a while to build, but once they're complete, hopefully I won't have to keep flying back so often. The stone mine isn't within those walls though, so it just gets some more laser turrets. Good luck, buddy. I don't want to launch an empty rocket, so I put myself in it, then left. One set of iron ingots, and another one for copper, although I really shouldn't have built in the middle of this swamp. Copper has the same ratios as iron, so a quick swap later, we can start worrying about steel. Steel is the same as iron and copper, but the casting machines also need coke as input, so I'll have to redesign that bit. Biters on the stone mine. I don't even care anymore. They can have it. Casting steel is a tad slower, so it needs quite a few more casting machines. Iron, copper, and steel are all ready to be built, but we don't have enough industrial furnaces to actually build them. And since industrial furnaces take blue circuits, we'll also need to set up rare metals. Rare metals don't have a casting recipe, but you can get more bang for your buck by smelting them with vulcanite blocks. So, stealing the chemical plants from the other setups, I'll plan out rare metals. But rare metals are enriched with hydrogen chloride, which you need sand to make, so I'll have to make it outside of the smelting setup. With all of the inputs added, I had an idea. Using ingots instead of plates on the bus gives us 10 times the density per belt, and unpacking the ingots is easy to do on site. Seems like a good idea. One belt should be plenty. I doubt we'll ever need more than that. The bus will eventually hit the edge of the moon, but we'll just keep turning the bus. To start enriching ores, we'll need to set up sulfuric acid, but before that, I'll hook up some miners for rare metals, even though we don't have the chlorine to mine it with yet. Then we'll need to get vulcanite blocks, which I'll put on the bus and request from Navis. It would be a lot cheaper to use cargo rockets to send the blocks over, but we'll do that later. I just want to get everything up and running first. Onto the sushi belt, and into the chest. Now let's set up some oil processing. We'll need it for sulfuric acid later. This patch here looks pretty good, and I'll make an easily expandable oil setup for it. But I don't actually have the pipes to build it, and it would take too long to ship them in from Navis. So time to make a mall for a few basic items, like pipes, power poles, inserters, and red belts. While I wait for the pump jacks to craft, I can place some more concrete. A full inventory hardly makes a dent. The bots aren't doing anything at the moment, so I'll have them place the concrete for me. After hooking in the pump jacks, that's oil. Let's start plugging in all of the ores. We'll route everything through landing pads, so we can easily ship in more ore in the future. For now, I'll only hook up one belt for each ore. Wouldn't want to waste too many red belts. We'll also need a couple belts for coal, since we still need to make coke. If 2 red belts of coal ends up not being enough, we can always upgrade to blue, green, and purple belts later. 2 more belts for stone. Copper is the closest resource, so I'll set up mining for it first. As for the other resources, they're pretty spread out, so we'll need to use trains for them. I'll have a station for each resource, including mineral water and oil. Rails are a pain to make, so while I wait for them to ship in from Navis, I'll hook up all of the dirty water outputs to a couple filtration plants. And we'll turn the byproduct sand into more landfill. Since we started core mining back up on Navis, we've got a bunch of raw rare metals over there, so I'll ship them over too. We don't have any trains for delivery yet, but I'll hook up the belts for iron, then plug in the water for ore enrichment. After stealing iron ore from the temporary smelting setup, a meteor landed right on top of copper ingot production. Luckily, it didn't destroy any of the industrial furnaces. I'll run stone and coal over, then we can make sulfuric acid. The oil setup should really be at the beginning of the bus, so I moved it on back, then set up the acid, which needs iron plates, so we'll have to steal some ingots from the casting machines. After kickstarting that, I realized the acid setup is directly in the way of expanding iron ingot production, but both past me and present me will let future me deal with that. Now for pyroflux, which is just blocks and sand. But plugging it in revealed the pipes aren't connected properly, so I fixed that. Then I plugged in sulfuric acid, which kicks the entire ingot production into gear. Enrich the iron, melt the iron, and cast the iron. 84 hours in, there's our first ingots. Rare metals and steel production isn't ready quite yet, but I'll set those up later. And we just got another load of productivity modules from Navis, so those will make their way into the production. We're missing most of the furnaces and casting machines, but we'll make the rest of them after we set up blue circuits. Which we shall do next time. I'd like to take a moment to thank my supporters on Ko-fi. This episode really didn't go in the direction I was expecting, but I think setting up smelting on Turgmam would have been more of a burden than an asset. And Karis is in the perfect spot for shipping in every resource that I know about. Hopefully this will give us a good base to build the new science on top of. And that's all for today. My name's DocJade. Bye-bye.